Welcome to the Life Self-Mastery Podcast, where we bring in entrepreneurs who have created online businesses and improved their lifestyles. Here's your host, Rohit Malhotra.
Hi everyone, this is Rohit from Lifestyle Mastery. Today I'm excited to have Peter Livingston, who's a general partner in Unpopular Ventures. Peter was earlier an engineer, an entrepreneur, and angel investor before he became a VC. Peter was the founder of Lifesquare and worked with GE Ventures. Peter has done his mechanical engineering from Stanford and MBA from Stanford. Welcome to the show, Peter.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So, how did you get into the world of venture capital?
Sure. Well, I wish I had a really interesting story, but the truth is that I grew up in a town called Woodside. It's very close to Sand Hill Road, and when I was growing up there, venture capital and startups was something that was just it was all around me, and that was kind of the main business and career path that a lot of the people that I knew went to. I wish I'd kind of come from rags to riches or not known anything or had an interesting story, but the reality is I kind of, it's kind of a business that I was kind of exposed to from a young age, and it always seemed super interesting to me. My dad worked at a bunch of startups that were venture funded, and I would hear about them and stuff. And I always thought, I would love to get into that world and be involved in startups and build new technology and invest in it. And right when I was graduating from college, I asked around and said, hey, I want to join a super early startup. And, found one that had literally just gotten seed funding. It's this company called iRhythm. I was one of the first 3 people there. And, in retrospect, I got really lucky because the company worked. We launched a bunch of products successfully. It was a medical device company. And they ended up going public in 2016 and are valued at about $3.5 billion now.
Wow.
So it just worked. And from there, I was with them for a few years, went back to business school. I founded Lifesquare, another company in between. That one didn't work out. It was a complete disaster in every way, but learned a lot from it. And after that, I wanted to try a venture. The place I landed was at GE Ventures, which was great. There were a lot of smart people there. But while I was there, it was corporate venture. So it was kind of all the investments had to have a strategic angle relative to GE. And in my experience there, I realized I really don't believe in corporate venture. I think there's just a lot of incentive misalignment, and venture capital as a job to begin with is super hard. Like most venture funds don't even return 1x the money. And then it's something like, it's a huge number, and it fluctuates over time, but I think that the number is something like 2/3 or 3/4 of venture funds don't beat the S&P 500. And so it's like, wow, wait a second. So just being a venture capitalist to make money is already hard. But then to also try to make money and have the strategic angle and all this other stuff, that's almost impossible. And so anyway, in my experience there, I realized I wasn't in love with corporate venture. But around that time, I'd started making some really tiny angel investments in friends' companies. So did 10 investments in 8 of my friends' companies. And most of them seemed to be doing well, making progress, raising more money at higher valuations. And I realized I loved that. And basically decided to leave GE and just focus on angel investing full time. I feel fortunate that it worked. So the subsequent 6 years or so, made over 150 personal angel investments through a lot of channels. So some were direct, some were through AngelList. I was part of a couple angel groups, did a few with them. Feel very fortunate that it worked. Made a few that did well, and one segment was I was very fortunate to catch the crypto wave very early, and had a couple investments there that returned the fund a couple times. And it just got to the point that I think I don't think anyone in this business really ever knows what they're doing, but at least I got to the point that people started to kind of think that I might know something. Right. And so friends started to ask if they could invest behind me. And it got to the point where I was like, okay, I feel like I kind of understand the business a little bit, people that want to invest with me. And so I created my syndicate on AngelList and invited friends to back me. And I've just grown up from there.
No, absolutely, a super story. And you said that corporate VC fund sometimes doesn't align the align with the founders. But what was the experience, and what is the investment thesis when you work in a corporate VC fund versus a normal VC fund where the partners, 3 or 4 partners are looking to invest. What was your experience? For listeners who are looking to look at making a career in VC.
Well, so like what is the experience in VC like or corporate?
Corporate.
I'm sure I didn't completely understand the question.
Yeah. So what happens? How's the investment thesis in a corporate VC fund, and why do you feel that or do you feel that corporate VC somebody should take investments from a corporate VC fund or not?
Oh yeah. Okay. So so I guess the challenge with a corporate VC fund versus a normal VC is just trying to make money.
Right.
It's already hard. Now, a corporate VC, so you take someone like GE or any major corporation that spends a venture fund. So GE, I think when I was there, was doing over $100 billion of revenue per year and profit. I don't remember what the number was, but it was like at least $10 billion of profit per year.
Right.
Now, you think about, okay, so then they spin up this venture arm, and if you do the math, so let's say they get in on the next Google or Uber or Facebook. Most likely, they're like in a best case scenario, if they get in early, maybe they would get 2 or 3 percentage points of ownership.
Right.
If they got in on the best venture investment of that decade, and then when that one goes public, maybe it's worth $100 billion or something like that. Absolute best case scenario, and so their 2 or 3% might be worth $2 or $3 billion. Like that's the best thing that could possibly happen. But the whole company, and it happens, and they get the money 10 years later.
Right.
But their business just made $10 billion in profit this year. So nobody cares about that $2 or $3 billion, but that's like the mega super grand slam, the best thing that could ever happen for the venture fund. So it's like financially, it doesn't really make sense for them to be doing this. So the reason they're doing it is, they want to find strategic opportunities that allow them to make their existing businesses a little bit more profitable. Like if they can increase the profit of their appliances business by 10% a year, and it was $10 billion a year, that immediately increases their profit by $1 billion a year. So that's really worth it. Right. So basically what they're doing is they're looking for startups that they can plug into their existing businesses to make them more profitable. And it just creates a misalignment because, they don't actually care what happens with the startup. They care what happens to their business. And sure, maybe that could be aligned, but that's a really tricky thing to navigate. Right. And then GE Ventures actually shut down recently. And I think probably the challenge is that they're making decisions in the best interest of GE, but they're not necessarily making good financial investments. Right. And also because of this weirdness, probably the best companies aren't coming to them. So they're losing a ton of money. And then corporate's like, wait, why are you losing all this money? And it's hard to measure exactly what they did for the businesses. And it's really misaligned and hard to kind of, it's hard to make it all work.
Right. No, absolutely.
Sorry. Going back to your question. So yeah, I've kind of personally, I think it can work if the objective really is just to make money. Right. Give them complete freedom, go make money. Like I think Google Ventures is a pretty good corporate venture arm. Yeah. And Intel Capital, I think, has done pretty well. But the vast majority of corporate venture arms flame out. And so yeah, I think venture capital as a whole is great, and to go just work for a conventional firm where they have a focused thesis and they're really just trying to invest in great companies and make money, and all together that works. But conventional corporate venture, not sure if I believe in it anymore now that I've been close to it.
Got it. And you've been an angel investor for 6-7 years. How did your experience as an angel investor impact your investment thesis, mindset, and your thesis before you launch your own angel syndicate? Yeah,
well, I find the angel stuff really fun for a lot of reasons. One is that you get to call the shots. Like usually when you're part of a firm with a lot of people, there's a lot of politics, and you've got to kind of get everyone else on board with the investment, and you've got to kind of focus on portfolio construction where it's like, you don't do too many deals in any given area. And, there's all these kind of constraints. But as an angel, you can just do whatever you think looks cool. Right. But obviously you bring a lot less money to the table, or at least, some angels are big, but I'm tiny. So it's hard in its own ways, but it's really nice to have the freedom, I think, to just invest in whatever you think is cool. And the biggest learning for me actually is, and kind of a big part of the thesis of Unpopular is that my best investments as an angel were the ones I couldn't get anyone else to do. They were the really crazy ones, the ones that were super unpopular and just very off the beaten path, or people didn't understand them. And so, like as one example, Bitcoin was one where I was part of a big 60-person angel group. I brought it to my angel group and said, "Look, like, I know this isn't a conventional startup, but the potential of it is very startup-like." And this was in 2015, when it was in the $200 per coin.
Right.
And I kind of pitched them on it 4 times. Like, I sent big emails to the whole group and said, "Look, here's why I think this might be a great investment." And everyone got really angry at me. They're like, "This is so inappropriate. This is not like a good fit for our group. This is not even a company. It doesn't make revenues. It doesn't make profits, et cetera, et cetera." But it turned out that, like, that if people in the group had invested in that one, that would have like made it would return, 3x every investment that group had made.
Right.
And that's the thing. It's like the best. What I learned from that, and connecting that to what I'd read from others, is that the best investments usually do feel weird and not safe. And that wasn't the only one. That was the biggest one, but there were others where it's just like I couldn't get anyone else to do some of these. But if you really took the time to kind of deeply understand them, they were compelling. And then, anyway, in retrospect, the best ones were all the ones that were pretty unpopular. Yeah. So I think that was my biggest one. And connecting that to VC, if I had been part of a firm, I probably wouldn't have been able to do those ones because they would have been unpopular within the overall firm.
Right. Absolutely makes sense. And Peter, how can one develop an investment thesis to be consensus and bold? Because I've seen a lot of the deals that which you source out of are really bold, and they're across different geographies, and they're very unpopular. Like you've talked about Airbnb and Amazon and a lot of other companies which people had written off, but went on to become such great companies. So how does one develop that mental model and that investment thesis to really go after bold and unpopular ideas?
Well, it's very nice of you to say. I don't know that all of mine are super unpopular. I'm definitely guilty of doing some that are hot and more mainstream, and certainly some are less popular. And obviously, I have to kind of I have to find a balance, because if it's too weird and unpopular, none of the LPs will do it, and I can't run the deal. Right. But thank you for saying that. I guess I don't know if I have a good answer to your question. Like, of how do you build that mental model and the framework? I think that the reality is that most of the best investors already know this. Like, the best investors already are non-consensus thinkers, and I think maybe I've just read a lot from them. So Peter Thiel and Mark Andreessen and Paul Graham is super non-consensus and rubs people the wrong way and all this stuff. But they're brilliant thinkers. And I think pretty much every good investor has figured this out, that you do have to be non-consensus and right.
Right.
So if you listen to kind of their mental frameworks and how they talk, and I think at least for me, I've probably just been inspired by a lot of the greats out there.
Correct. And also, I've seen that you've invested in Africa and South America as well. Now, how do you assess great opportunities which are not in US? You've met the founder maybe on Zoom, but how do you assess such opportunities? Especially, I've seen opportunities like PCAP, which is a motorcycle ride hail, and ER Technologies, which is another similar company in Africa. How do you assess such opportunities? And what is the due diligence you do so that you're able to source out such great deals?
Oh, sure. Well, thanks. I'm glad you think they're great. I do too, but time will tell for sure.
Sure. Yeah.
I think first and foremost, it always starts with the people.
Right.
And it's are these people that seem credible and trustworthy, and it's both the founders, but then also the kind of the solar system of people that is coming together around them.
Right.
And so, like, this is another one of those things where it's like, I wish I could say that I just picked random people out of nowhere and then they went on to be successful, but that's not the truth. The truth is that I kind of picked people that seem to have had success before and are kind of connected to people that have been successful as well. And so, in the case of Yasir or Yeah Technologies in Africa, for example, the CEO is very, very credible. He's a Stanford PhD. had founded a company before that's backed by NEA.
Right.
He was independently wealthy from some, he was a corporate executive at like Intel and other companies for a while. So he really was a known person with a track record of success. And then he also put $1 million of his own money into the company. And kind of all those steps, and then he's from Algeria and knows that region, and that's where the headquarters of the company is.
Right.
So just kind of those things together initially, the person that's leading it, it's a very credible person. The truth is, I wish I could, but I probably wouldn't be able to pick a random person in Africa and be like, oh yeah, you're going to go and be successful. I'm just not that smart. I don't have the ability to find and pick that person. But to kind of pick someone that is already kind of known and kind of knows the region and has a track record of success and has a lot of skin in the game, that's kind of an easier bet.
Right.
And then on top of that, the traction numbers that they had were very good. And so you can see app downloads, and you can look at their dashboard of transaction volume and usage, and then how much revenue are they generating, and how's that trending over time. And so if you kind of pair really good people with they've got a functioning business, that's basically it.
And no, absolutely. When we like you talked about numbers, right? And I want to talk about since you work with iRhythm and you build your own company, which is Lifesquare, what defines a product market fit? Because you wouldn't want a founder to spend 5 years at a time building a product which hasn't got the product market fit, or the founder to product market fit. What would you define a product market fit so that it fits into an investor's investment thesis and they're able to invest and grow into that company, or the founder knows that he's not wasting his time building that company?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the key is, so every startup involves risk, but you want to be really thoughtful about which risks you take. Right. So one of the frameworks for thinking about startup risk is that there are usually two big buckets of risk in a startup. There are more than two, but the two biggest ones could be labeled technical risk and market risk. And what I mean by each of those, so technical risk is like, can we even build this? Or with not a ton of money or not a lot of time, like is it easy to build or not? And with market risk, it's more of a question of like, do customers want this, or is the market big enough? Like, can we actually sell enough of it to have a good business? And so examples of, say, technical risk are, there are no companies that are low technical risk and low market risk, because those have already been built. Right. If it's that easy, people go do it. Now, on the flip side, it's really dangerous to take both high technical risk and high market risk, because you don't want to spend, as you said, 5 years building this thing and burn hundreds of millions of dollars and then realize that nobody wants it.
Right.
So what you usually want is either high technical risk and low market risk, or low technical risk and high market risk. And examples of these are, I would say an example of high tech risk but low market risk is flying cars. Like, right. Everybody wants a flying car. Everyone's been talking about it for decades. It's like, when are we going to get our flying cars? So that if you could build one in the way that people are imagining it, everyone would want it, but it's really, really hard, and you don't know if you can. An example of the opposite, so low technical risk but high market risk, might be actually something like Facebook initially, where it's like Zuckerberg built the original version of Facebook by himself in 40 days. Like, that's pretty easy to build. But there had been like 10 different social networks before that, and none of them really got the same level of traction. And none of them had figured out how to tap the customers in the right way that really got them to want it. Right. And most social networks are high market risk but low technical risk, because you're not sure if the dog's going to eat the dog food per se. So where I'm going with this is it's like you want to pick one or the other. It's okay to take market risk if you can kind of build it quickly and iterate and keep experimenting and trying to figure out exactly what the market wants. But you don't want to do that with high technical risk and spend a lot of time. On the flip side, if you know 100% that this is what their world needs and what people want, and it's like very obvious, then yeah, it's okay to take more technical risk. You can take a few years to build it because you know that if you build it, they will come. But yeah, the key is to kind of figure out which risk you're taking and make sure you're only taking one or the other risks, or you're limiting your risks. I don't know if that makes sense.
Got it. And I recently had Fabulous Grinda, who's the founder of FCA Labs on the podcast, and he was very clear about what he's a guru in marketplaces, and he loves investing into marketplaces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and,
he's in Yasir with us actually. Yeah, I think we're co-invested in a few companies. He's great.
Wonderful. Yeah. I mean, he's very smart and intelligent, and he was very clear about what are the important metrics for him to invest into startups. But what do you think are the most important metrics for you to invest into startups when you're looking into sectors as diverse as fintech to logistics to transportation? What would if they want to approach a founder wants to approach you, what are the important metrics they should keep in mind? Because when you're looking at a seed stage funding, they don't have CAC to LTV ratios, or do you think those ratios are important at a seed fund stage?
A great question. So first, it's different for every business.
Right.
If going to the last framework we talked about, if it's a high technical risk business, but they've made impressive R&D milestones where they're kind of proving out that it's going to work, but they don't have any sales yet, that's fine. Like if we know it's going to sell and they're the right people to build it and they've made progress on it, then I'll invest in that with effectively no sales metrics. Now, and then for the ones that are in the market, it's always different. So you have to evaluate it based on the specific business. I guess the way that I often distill it down for people is that I on pretty much every deal I do, I want to see something numerically miraculous. Okay. So I want to see something that it's in numbers and is really surprising or not obvious or something like that. And so it doesn't necessarily mean like a certain amount of revenue, although that works. I'm often really impressed by a huge amount of revenue that's growing quickly. But it could also be really surprising engagement. Like Clubhouse as one example that recently raised a ton of money at a high valuation. The number that was miraculous for them was that people spent a lot of time on the platform. Like I think they had fewer than 1,000 users on the platform, but people would come and stay for hours and hours, and then they'd come back the next day and keep doing it. Wow. And so yeah, actually one of my favorite things to ask entrepreneurs is, what do you think is the most important metric in your business? And it's an interesting question for a few reasons. So the first is that it lets you see how the entrepreneur is thinking about their own business. And sorry, it's like foggy and there's like water dripping on me. So usually when I ask this question, what do you think is the most important metric in your business? The entrepreneur, either the entrepreneur is not thoughtful, or it shows how thoughtful they are about considering all the elements of their business and what matters and what doesn't. And then if they can kind of articulate the specific thing, they get to, okay, this is the thing that is most important right now. And also in most businesses, the most important metrics change over time. So they might be focused on one thing initially, like Clubhouse as an example, they're trying to build a good product with high engagement, but later they'll probably care more about total users, and then later they'll care more about total revenue or something like that. So it'll change over time. Okay. But to the extent that the entrepreneur can articulate why a certain thing is the most important thing right now, and then we can talk about what they're doing to improve that metric. And then we also see how that metric is changing over time. That can often be the seed of like a really compelling story about why they're doing really well with their business. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. Metrics could be different for different entrepreneurs or different industries per se. I wanted to understand, are there any sectors you enjoy, I mean, you really enjoy investing in, or are there any sectors you avoid, or you pretty much look at any sector and you would want to invest once you understand, what is the team and the founder looking to build?
I mean, I'll do anything. Like the core thing I really look for is really great people.
Okay.
And I get excited when they're kind of going and doing something weird and different. And yeah, I'll do that at any stage. Like I do some stuff that's pre-revenue, but I usually expect to see that they've really thought it through or already kind of done some testing. And then I do a lot where they have some traction or miraculous numbers, as I call them, where they're kind of a little ways along and making some progress on it and executing on their vision.
Correct. And in 2018, I was looking into the annual report. You were trying to build your own VC fund, and but you now build a very successful angel syndicate. What is the secret to build a syndicate? I've been trying to help raise funds for startups through the syndicate model in India, but I've not been successful. So, what is it that an angel syndicate should do if they want to, or even a VC? Who wants to, build their own fund? What were your learnings when you're trying to create your own syndicate and get as many number of LPs, good LPs who can come and back your syndicate?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, you touched on a backstory, so I'll share that with the listeners. So it's funny. After I'd been in angel investing successfully for a while, I went and tried to raise a normal fund. I tried to raise a $20 million venture fund, talked to a ton of LPs, and got turned away by every single one of them. And there were kind of two pieces of feedback. So the first was we were living in Florida at the time, and they didn't like that I was in Florida.
Right.
And the second one was that I had put up good returns with my own money. And it was kind of like, the feedback was like, it doesn't really count when it's your own money. So they wanted to see that I had put up good returns with other people's money. And then it was also combined with bigger checks. So my personal checks were tiny. It's very easy to get a 5 or 10K check into a hot deal, but it's much harder to get $500,000 or $250,000 or whatever it is. So they wanted to see that I could do the same thing, but with bigger checks and other people's money. And so initially switching over to AngelList was a pivot for me, where I thought, okay, I'm going to go do this, prove that out, and then go raise the fund. And the funny thing is, the syndicate took off, and I'm already moving more money faster through the syndicate than I would have been with my $20 million fund. Right. And I like the structure, and there's some interesting things I can do with it. And it's come to the point where I've realized I like this better than doing the fund. And I've decided, whereas this was supposed to be a stepping stone to the fund, I've decided this is where I actually want to be. And so I'm going to stay here. So getting to your question of how do you kind of build it, I think I benefited some from having had a lot of experience, both operating in startups and investing myself and building kind of a mental framework about it. But you don't need that. I think the key, so the two keys are access to good deals and being able to tell a compelling story about them. And I haven't always been good at the storytelling, but I think I've gotten better at it. Right. And so with AngelList, it basically started out by just trying to do good deals. Would reach out to everybody that I could and say, hey, I'm doing this deal, check it out. And I got feedback from a lot of people that people liked the way that I wrote about them and the way that I crafted the story and kind of the way I articulated the important points. And I've just kept doing it and trying to improve. And, as I've kind of gotten more, built more of a brand, I've gotten access to even better deals. Yeah. And as I do better deals, more people keep joining. So I think that's basically it.
Interesting. And you started in 2019, and I think you've already done around 35 investments this is like we're recording in the mid of 2020. But do you think a syndicate model can be an alternative to VC model, or do you think it's going to disrupt the VC model going forward? Because a lot of VCs might have their own biases, when it comes to investing into startups. But do you think, especially when it comes to seed funding, do you think an angel-less syndicate model or even crowdfunding campaigns would be able to disrupt the VC model going forward?
I do. So I know this is a very controversial and maybe the word that you would use is bold bet. Right. But I do think that it might take a while. I think within 20 years, there will be one or more syndicates amongst the top 10 or 20 VCs. I think within the next 10 years, you're going to see AngelList syndicate leads on the Forbes Midas list. So the Midas list is the ranking of the 100 best VCs at a given time. Right. I think we'll start to see syndicate leads on there. Right. And then, I think as time goes on, I think that so there's some things that are really interesting about the syndicate model. So the first is, one thing that I've levered to my advantage is the carry that's deal by deal. So in a conventional venture fund, the carried interest, the share of the profits, the performance incentive, is on the whole portfolio. So it's only when your whole portfolio performs well that the carry is worth something. But at a syndicate, the carry is deal by deal. And the way that I've used that to my advantage is that I share carry on each deal very generously with those who help me on the deals. So I share huge chunks of my carry with anyone who refers me a deal that I do. I share carry with if someone helps one of our companies find their next round VC, and we get an allocation in that round. I've a friend that recently I plugged him into one of our companies to be an executive for that company, and I intend to share carry with him on our next investment in that company. And so it's pretty neat to be able to share the carry in all these ways, and particularly on the deal sourcing. I found that I basically pay people that bring me deals more than Sequoia pays their scouts. Effectively, so Sequoia has a structure with their scouts where they get a performance fee, but I share a huge chunk of the carry with anyone that brings me a deal, and I do. And I found that basically already in the structure, I'm able to compensate my scouts more than Sequoia compensates their scouts, and I have a lot more of them. And so one distinction, I think maybe the key is that in a conventional VC scout program, they have to have effectively written agreements with all their scouts. So it's almost like they kind of hire these people as consultants, and then they have a written agreement, and that's just burdensome. Basically, if you take syndicates kind of to their logical conclusion. So in the syndicate model, because of what I'm able to do with the carry around sharing it with people that bring me deals and very generously, and I effectively am able to pay my scouts more than Sequoia pays their scouts.
Right.
And then also what I bring to the table as a syndicate, where, if an entrepreneur is raising money from a VC, they usually get the help of that one partner. But then the money behind them is just a bunch of boring pension funds.
Right.
And it's a very easy sell. In contrast, in a syndicate, I usually bring anywhere from 30 to 150 individuals who are all personally invested in the opportunity. They're spread around the world in a variety of careers as, either former entrepreneurs or engineers or tech executives, and a lot of them are individual VC partners. And it's just a very easy sell to say, hey, who do you want your money from? Do you want it from 100 awesome individuals who can help you in a bunch of different ways, or a bunch of boring pension funds that aren't going to help you at all?
Right.
And so there are kind of all these things that are different. We're still figuring it out, but the trajectory that this is on is that I think that syndicates will continue to grow in prominence. I think that within the next 10 years, we're going to see AngelList syndicate leads on the Forbes Midas list, right, which is a list of all the 100 top VCs. And who knows, maybe in a longer time frame, maybe within 20 years, we're going to see syndicates on the, amongst the top 10 or 20 VC firms. And this is the crazy bold prediction. Maybe one day a syndicate, if it develop, if you continue on this trajectory, right, maybe a syndicate will displace Sequoia as the number one startup investor. I know that's heretical and crazy, but I don't know. And we haven't figured it all out yet. There still have to be things that are invented and refined. Right. But right, on the trajectory it's on, it could go there.
Right. But no, very interesting because what I've seen with the syndicate model is that you can invite people, and also sharing the carry is also a way to help other people who are actually it gives an incentive to other LPs to give you the best of deals. So that is a really positive thing out there. And I wanted to understand, how can a founder choose a VC who can be there with him for 10 years, and it's almost like a marriage when a founder gets a VC on board. How do they get to choose a good VC who can help them build the company and avoid getting a bad VC on board?
Oh, it's really hard. So the truth is, so the first thing I learned is I think that it's such a weird dynamic because VCs, their role is not to build your company for you, but they try to act like they are. Like oftentimes to kind of win deals or act like they're so helpful, they talk about all this value they bring. Right. But the reality is VCs don't, I've heard of very few cases where the VCs are actually being super helpful to the companies. And the reality is it's the company, it's the founder and the people he hires, those are the people in the company they're building it. And and again, every VC will try to say, "Oh no, we help so much and we do all this value." But how can most VCs are invested in at least 10 different companies, and it's just that one individual that's invested in all of them. How is that person going to add so much more value than the CEO that's in there full time and is like owns a lot of it, and all the employees that are working day and night trying to make this thing succeed? And it almost seems arrogant for VCs to claim that they are the cause of the success of companies or anything like that.
Right.
So I guess my kind of cynical view is that VCs aren't supposed to add that much value. If they do, if they make some intros, help with some hires, sure, that's great. Like, do it. And I do that. But to kind of claim that VCs are going to be in there side by side with the founders, helping them build their companies, I think it's, I don't think that's ever really true. And it's like, I think it's Vinod Khosla also who says that 90% of, or like some huge percentage of VCs add no value. And then the ones that add no value actually add negative value. There are almost none that add positive value. And I'm sure there are some that add positive value. And I would like to think that I'm one. But I don't do anything near what the entrepreneurs do. I mean, the people that are actually running their businesses, they're the heroes. And, sure, I'm glad I can bring in some money so that they can kind of be more successful, but it's a pretty small piece of their overall journey. So I don't know. I guess I'd like to take a little bit more humble approach.
Right.
And then yeah, like I'm invested in a lot of companies, and so the truth is I'm not that involved with them. I try to pick really great people that are competent and I think are going to be successful on their own. I help them get some extra money in, and then I let them go do it. And sure, I love to hear about how they're doing, and if there are simple things I can help with, I'd love to help. But the reality is the people building the companies, the ones that are going to, the people that are going to make them successful are the entrepreneurs themselves.
Got it. And since you mentioned you invest in more than 35 companies and you build your syndicate, what advice are you giving to founders who are heavily impacted by COVID, especially when it comes to transportation companies, and to really effectively analyze their spend and optimize their runway? What is your outlook, whether we're going to have a V shape or an L shape recovery going forward?
It's super, super hard. And it's like randomly cruel. So some companies have just gotten completely obliterated by COVID. It really sucks. And it's like you couldn't have predicted which ones those were going to be ahead of time. Like there's some companies doing great, and then as long as COVID exists, their revenue goes to zero. And it just sucks. It's like they did everything right, and this thing came on and screwed them over. But then on the flip side, there are a lot of companies that also randomly have really benefited from it and seen a boost in sales because people need their service more than they did before COVID. And so it's kind of randomly boosted and hurt different companies. And in many cases, there's not a lot you can do. But what I have seen is that some entrepreneurs have figured out really good pivots. Like, maybe they saw an evolution of their business that became a lot more relevant in a COVID world. Or there are others that completely switched verticals, and they were still nimble enough that they could kind of turn off their original business and move all their employees and resources over to something else that is a lot more relevant. And I think that the companies that are so like the beauty of startups is that they are so nimble, and although oftentimes they're kind of on one business, they're not fully invested in that business usually, and they're often in a position where they can kind of switch over to something else pretty quickly. And I think that's what entrepreneurs that have been impacted have to focus on. It's just, okay, we're a nimble business. What can we move to continue to be successful? And that's also something that is especially hard for the large later stage companies, or public companies. Large public companies with thousands or hundreds of thousands of employees can't just change their business overnight.
Right.
And so I think those companies that have been negatively impacted, like the airlines is one example, there's very little hope for them. Like they just have to hope that everything gets better. But for startups, like, a lot of them are software based and nimble, and I know it's not easy, but if they can find a pivot to something that makes more sense. And I guess the last thing I'd say is that we really don't know how long COVID is going to last.
Right.
It might last 10 years. I mean, I really hope that's not the case, but this might be with us for a long time. We might get a V-shaped recovery in the economy because people still have money and they need to spend, and they need to eat, and they need to do things. But the companies that have gotten whacked by COVID may never come back. Past, the bubonic plague, I think lasted for, it was either decades or centuries. And who knows, like, HIV, they said for years that they would have a vaccine for HIV, and we never got it. It's still here, decades later. And yeah, we may never have a vaccine for COVID. This may be how we live for a long time. So anyway, but it might also go away. So I guess I think that entrepreneurs should just embrace the uncertainty and try to set themselves up for success no matter what happens in the world. You can't hope for anyone outcome.
Got it. And, I quickly want to do the top 3. What's your favorite business book?
Favorite business book, Peter Thiel's 0 to 1. And I know it's controversial, but I think it has a lot of original thinking and helped me kind of think about the world in a different way.
Got it. And, if you could go back in time when you started working on Unpopular Syndicate, what is the one thing you would have done differently, or, what is the one thing you would have focused on?
Oh, with starting the syndicate?
Yeah.
To be honest, I feel very fortunate that the syndicate has gone as well as it has. I've heard from AngelList that I'm now within the top 3 syndicates in terms of money moved per month, and I'm bigger than people that have been on it for a long time. So I feel very fortunate that my kind of development has been as successful as it has, and I, sure, maybe there are things I could have gone back and changed. I'm in a couple deals that have not gone well. I wish I hadn't done those, but that's venture. So no, I feel very grateful that things have worked as well as they have.
Got it. And do you have any favorite online tools, for example, Gmail, Slack, Zoom?
Oh, it's funny, for a technology investor, I'm very much not on the forefront of technology. I use Gmail, I use Zoom, I text with WhatsApp. I think that is about it. Yeah, I don't have anything fancy that I use.
Got it. And, what is the best way people can reach out to you and know more about Unpopular Ventures?
Well, so there's a fair bit about me online already. Start there. So the reality is, I'm in the fortunate position that I get just a ton of deal flow. I have 30, I don't know what the number is exactly, but I have 20 to 30 deals in my email right now that I still need to respond to. They're a couple days old. And the reality is I just don't have the time to kind of consider everything and chat with everybody. And so I therefore place a high emphasis on filtering. And so I really look to actually my LPs to help me find great deals. And in fact, because I'm so generous with the carry that I share with anyone who refers me a deal, it can be an LP or it could be a friend. I really look for them to do some vetting already, like having done some real diligence, help me articulate maybe three to 5 points about why this one is super compelling. And I really kind of lean on that to kind of help me filter down from too many deals for me to process right now and kind of figure out which are the ones to focus on. So I guess the advice that I would give is, I do have over 1,000 LPs in my syndicate and lots of portfolio CEOs. And if you really think you're fit for me, I know it's a cop-out and I feel bad saying it, but the truth is reach out to someone who knows me and convince them. And if you do, and they bring it to me and we do it, they get a big reward because I should carry back with them. But the truth is I just don't have enough hours in the day to respond to everybody that would like to talk to me. And I feel terrible about it.
Got it. And do you have any recent investment that you've made this year that you really positive and gung-ho about?
All of them. We're in a lot of really great ones. There are a few that are really starting to break away. Curtsy, as one example, is just doing phenomenally well. Their growth is off the charts. I think they're going to end up with a huge Series A soon. Kite. So what they are, Curtsy is it lets you buy and sell clothes from your phone. Okay. And the key part is selling your used clothes, and they give you like digital wardrobe, so you can kind of buy and sell clothes with your friends and stuff like that. And it's just really done surprisingly well. It's very popular with young women. Another one that seems to really be taking off is Kite, which is it's kind of rental cars on demand. So they deliver your rental car for you. And it's really focused on people that have gone full Uber, as they call it, where, they don't want to own a car anymore and they take an Uber or a Lime bike whenever they need to get anywhere. But they still want a car maybe 10% of the time to go to a business meeting or go on a weekend trip. But it's really difficult for them to get over to the rental car center. They would have to take an Uber to get there. And so this company brings the rental cars to you. And they've also seen phenomenal growth even through COVID. And I think that they have a big next round coming together soon too. And anyway, those were two that came to mind, but there's a lot that are doing great. Omsom is one we just invested in, and they just launched less than a month ago, and they've seen unbelievable sales traction already, and it seems very popular, and people are repeat ordering and loving the product, and so that one's cool too. And I don't know, I only invest in companies I'm very excited about, so I think everything in our portfolio is super exciting, and I'm very bullish on.
Peter will put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for taking your time and speaking to us. I really enjoyed speaking to you, man.
Likewise. Thank you so much for reaching out, Rohit. And really great to have you in the syndicate. And I'm glad we're able to do this.
Thanks for listening to the Life Self-Mastery podcast, where we teach you how to start and grow your online business. For more information, visit Rohit's blog at www.lifeselfmastery.com.